It's all happening simultaneously because you have houses with children, babies, infants, all the way up to teenage boys and teenage girls who are also, this is happening to them at the same time as it's happening to us in the office. You hear a bang at the door and a big explosion type sound at the basement. They blew out the window. The office is kind of like a square. Like, I'm going to just say it meets at this corner, like, meets at a corner like this. And there's a window right here, front door. You hear a boom, an explosion, glass shatter, and women just screaming. And so we're just praying, and they're like, lay down, lay down. We were all laying down on the floor. One of the sisters, she has an asthma attack. She was trying to breathe. Man comes up the steps. It's a spiral steps to get to the second floor. He comes and he points the gun directly in her face. So she really is about to just, because it's like, okay, this is it. I'm going to die. So he allowed her to get her inhaler. Another guy comes in, and they're really embarrassed. I mean, they're sweating. It's hot. They came to kill. They brought in over 200 agents. I'm talking, they flew them in from California, Washington, D.C., other cities, other counties, Atlanta. I mean, they made this a big effort. But what a lot of people don't know was the raid was planned for 3 a.m. 3 a.m. in the morning, where everybody was asleep. That's when they had planned the raid. By the grace of the Most High, it didn't happen at that time, because then it definitely would have been a slaughter, just a bloodbath, and women, children, men, women, everybody would have just been dead. And on the news, it might have been chalked up as, oh, they killed themselves, or, you know, it was a war, men, women, children had guns, or just something like totally insane. It would have been chalked up as that. They literally came with the freezer trucks and body bags, because that was what they had expected and what they had planned for. Children are crying. My daughter was like 2 years old at the time, and the children were made to get down on their knees with guns to their head and their hands over their head. When they blew in down to the bottom, they threw in tear gas. I'm glad that Doc wasn't here, because the reality is that's who they wanted to kill. Not even, it wasn't about an arrest. They were hoping he was there so that there would be some confrontation and they could take him out. And that's my personal feelings on that. For a raid that you plan for 3 o'clock a.m. in the morning, and you come in someone's house at 3 o'clock a.m. in the morning, they're going to want to defend themselves and defend their family. So that's what they expected, and it didn't happen that way.
Painful day. It's a painful day. It's a miracle. It's a miracle and a blessing. Dr. York survived, and all of us, because that clearly was not the intent of the day.
Thursday morning, May 9th, an arraignment hearing took place in Macon, Georgia, before Magistrate Court Judge Hicks. An original plea of not guilty was entered on the court records.
They did the grand jury indictment, which is the procedure that they have to go through prior to enforcing a warrant of arrest. They have to be indicted first by a grand jury. Even at the grand jury, they asked, do you have any evidence? And she said, no, we have no evidence.
Former Macon police officer Joseph Hibner took a special interest in launching his own investigation into the York case, finding misconduct and procedural errors since day one of the grand jury indictment.
Special Investigator Jelaine Ward of the Federal Bureau of Investigation stated herself she don't have a witness or a shred of evidence to prove that Dr. York transported or caused to be transported children across state lines for illicit acts. The root of the indictment. She don't have a shred of evidence to prove it, or eyewitness.
During the first hearing, the other attorney he had that was working with the Garland firm was Johnson, Senator Johnson, and he waived Dr. York's speedy trial rights. That was the first step done. First, his presumption of innocence was taken away from the lawyer. Now, Garland, on that first day, was actually fighting. what he asked them to produce was proof of jurisdiction, because they were trying to prosecute Dr. York in federal and state,
Right.
which is unheard of, because first of all, there are no statutes in federal for child molestation.
Right.
Now, this is prior to the re-indictment. This is why they pulled in the RICO. So he said you have to prove jurisdiction.
The Garland firm argues the federal court has no jurisdiction to try Dr. York due to the statutes of limitations exceeding itself for child molestation and transporting minors across state lines.
Most of the allegations were past a statute of limitation if they were true anyway. And then thirdly, the other counts weren't even illegal at the time where they stated these acts happened. You know what I'm saying? Initially, like the transporting of children across state lines for the purpose of illicit sex. They're saying that Dr. York caused or did transport children from New York to Georgia just to do this. So first of all, it can't be illegal in the state you're exiting from. Your charges have to be illegal in the state you're arriving in where the act supposedly took place. And we asked them, if you, in essence, they used the Mann Act, which was initially set up to trap pimps and prostitutes. So the initial question is, okay, if you're charging him with bringing children from New York to Georgia for this purpose, then where's the person who engaged in the act?
The prosecution argues from 1993 to 2002, York committed these acts from New York to Georgia. However, without a strong indictment, the U.S. Attorney Office quickly re-indicted York on federal racketeering charges under the RICO law as a criminal enterprise.
They had the initial indictment, which was only 4 counts, which didn't involve racketeering, which didn't involve a whole bunch of the mess that later on they knew that initial indictment was going to fall in his face, so they came with a superseding indictment, what they called a superseding indictment. Superseding indictment allows you the ability to add on to your original indictment. This wasn't a superseding indictment. They re-indicted Dr. York because according to the initial indictment, they were charging him with things that wasn't even a crime at the time. Literally.
During the illegal search and seizure of May 8th, amongst the media frenzy outside the Nuwaubian property, 5 children were taken into Sheriff Seal's custody without express or written consent of their parents, nor DFAC procedures were followed.
They took the children and they put them in DFAC's custody.
Mind you, they didn't even literally take them to a DFAC's facility. They just took them somewhere and kept them.
Right, without the parents knowing or just anything. They literally just took
kidnapped them.
5 children. Long story short, the children were proven by the state of Georgia, Judge Spivey, to have never been molested.
But then they remained in DFAC's custody
But then they remained in DFAC's custody.
for months on end afterwards.
Yes. And not only that, they left these 5 children who were stated and proven to not have been molested by the state of Georgia, Judge Spivey's ruling, and still kept them in the indictment as to have being molested.
Right.
Not only that, they sealed the records
Of the ruling.
of the ruling of the children to not have been molested according to the state of Georgia.
I went objectively straight at this thing and said, okay, if I was the initial responding officer to a call that child molestation is happening at 404 Shadydale Road, what would I have done? According to the procedures that govern Georgia law enforcement officials, because you got to remember, this started with Sheriff Seals, who went to the GBI, who went to the FBI. See what I'm saying? So the root of this wrong. You start wrong, you end wrong. You see what I'm saying? At the root, this thing was corrupt and bogus from the beginning.
Garland's whole tone changed. I don't know if he had to sit down with someone who was like,
But it changed.
it changed 100%.
For the next several months, the Garland, Samuel, and Loeb firm, along with Frank Rubino and Associates, would spearhead their own clients' coercion in depleting the organization's finances.
Lawyers are ignoring people and not responding. Garland and them never showed up there except once to visit when they want to talk about money. You found that? Yeah. They never did really go over the case. They sent some young kid up there called Charles who would come up there and talk about history and nothing about the case. You follow? And that's from Garland's firm? That was from the Garland and Loeb firm. I didn't want to work with the Garland firm. I didn't trust them, and I knew they was working with SEALs.